There's been a lot of talk recently about the state of weapon balancing in this game, specifically in regards to the Scythe of Viter and Osmumten's Fang. Now, I did have Adicon and No Monkey on the Sabe cast this past Wednesday, which was really fun. I don't really feel like I was able to illustrate my points very clearly. I kind of sounded like a jumbled mess, to be quite honest. And so I'm making this ramble just to clear up some of my points that I made and just to kind of state where I am in like what I think basically of the state of weapons in this game and what I'd like to see. So these are all my personal opinions, and I am not going to die on any of these hills. So if you guys have any better information or better ideas, leave them down in the comments. Also, if you guys like this video, drop a like on it. And if you enjoy the rambles and the Sabe cast, be sure to subscribe. It'd be really cool to get to 17,000 subscribers this month. We'll see if it happens. Anyway, so let's just start off. Oh, also, I just want to say I'm also going to be talking more about forestry and also about skilling in general. I feel like I just need to make a few points on that. So I'm going to first talk about weapon balancing, then I'm going to move on to forestry, and then just skilling in general. So let's start off with Osmumten's Fang. So a lot of people want Osmumten's Fang to not be as powerful, so either get a nerf or buff the Scythe or something like that. And while that's good, I think it's kind of closed-minded. I think we've kind of pigeonholed ourselves into just thinking about these two weapons, and we're not really thinking of other previous best-in-slot weapons that have been shown basically no love. Those weapons being the Rapier, Saildor, and Inquisitor's Mace. These weapons, yes, they do have use occasionally, but not really. And if people are like, oh, well, you could just use them at Slayer. A lot of people don't really do melee Slayer anymore. They generally just barrage things. That's kind of what the meta has become. But I'm not going to argue that there's no use for these weapons. Of course there is, but you've now come out with a weapon called Osmumten's Fang, which is a lower hour requirement, arguably easier than any of these three weapons to obtain, and it's completely free to use. And it's better at a lot of places where these used to shine. So that's a problem, and we need to consider these weapons, not just the Scythe. So Scythe was released over 5 years ago with TOB, and this weapon, they introduced it in a really nice way. There's obviously a few cons, one of them just being the well mechanic, having to go to a station to charge this, and it's just the most arbitrary bullshit ever, and it takes 2 ingredients. I do not understand why this thing is charged with vials of blood. I understand kind of the lore behind it, sort of, but it's just strange, and I really feel like they should just completely rework how the Scythe is charged. Just make it charged with 3 blood runes for 1 charge. That's it. And I hear comments all the time in my videos saying, oh, you're so obsessed with charged weapons, shut the fuck up, and nobody likes charged weapons, they're really inconvenient. I agree that charging weapons is inconvenient in this game. I've been saying for years that charged weapons need to be streamlined and convenient. So my thoughts on this have not changed at all. I feel like every single charged weapon in this game should hold 100,000 charges and just be simple. Like just the ingredients you charge it with, boom, shove it in there, you're done. You're good for a few months or years, potentially how much you play, or weeks, depending on how much you play. But that would be honestly my optimal I guess outlook on charged weapons is just make them all very streamlined, make them convenient. The inconvenience of charging weapons is a problem, I do admit, but having a cost to use very powerful items is the way to go, in my opinion. So when Osmumten's Fang first came out, it was actually better than it currently is. Now, the original stats still are used in TOA, which is a problem on its own. I've never liked it when weapons are just arbitrarily better in certain situations. I think that's really stupid, and we should stop doing that. I know they did it with chambers, with like the T-bow just having absurd amounts of damage. That is a problem. Jagex had this problem where they're just releasing just fucking busted weapons literally busted weapons and then making the really odd changes because they realize how fucking busted they are. So we can just stop doing that. Just stop making extremely busted weapons, and then the weapon can be the same wherever you're using it. And there's no just like, why is this weapon randomly doing better in certain situations? Like, I understand if you've played this game every fucking day for the last 8 years, of course a lot of the random in and outs of this game. But when you're like coming into this game and you start reading up on these weapons, like, oh, it's good here, it's kind of good here, it's got a stat increase in this piece of content. Oh, this weapon doesn't work in the wilderness. Oh, this one is like, attack slower here. Like, what the fuck is going on? Can we just keep weapons like the same, like streamlined throughout the game? Jesus Christ. I really hope they start being more stern on that. Just realize a weapon is broken, and if it's broken, just nerf the weapon everywhere. Just holy shit. Anyway, so that's a problem, obviously. Now, Fang, of course, is really cheap, and the biggest reason for that, and I hate to say this because people always freak out, but it's just simply because it came out to what is supposed to be an endgame piece of content, and the piece of content ended up being accessible to everyone on release, and it's just what it is. So when you make a piece of content that's very, very easy and accessible, then of course a lot of people are going to do it, and a shit ton of items are going to come into the game. So people are like, oh, well, just if they had just made Osmumten's Fang more rare, how much more rare do you want it to be? 4 times as rare? Even if it was 4 times as rare, it would only be worth like 170 mil. There would still be a problem with the scythe being 500 mil. Like, people would still have a problem with this weapon. So, and nobody likes it when items are just way more uncommon, just for the sake of it, like just for the sake of like, oh, this weapon needs to be a certain price because of this weapon. And for some reason, nobody has a problem with Inquisitors. In fact, like 2 years after Inquisitors was released, or like 3 years or something, Torva came out, and everyone's like, oh yeah, just fuck Inquisitors. Torva's the new best in slot. And I was like, can we please like readdress where Inquisitors stands in this game? Like, it's almost got no use anymore. And people didn't have a problem. They're like, oh, well, things get outclassed eventually. But for some reason, people have a hard-on for the scythe, and they think, oh, this 5-year-old weapon needs to remain best in slot for eternity. Like, what about every other weapon? What about the rapier, for example? Like, nobody gives a fuck about this weapon. So I just think it's really silly that the community kind of gravitates towards certain items and just forgets other pieces of content entirely. So if we want to make the game balanced throughout, we need to look at the bigger picture and look at all pieces of content and have them sit in a good place, in my personal opinion. So Osmumten's Fang, I wish never got a nerf. I wish it was still just as powerful as it is in TOA, but I just wish it had some charges. If it was twice as rare, that would have been fine. If TOA magically we could go back in time and make it so the difficulty of it just, there was no entry mode. It like, in order to even enter the raid, you need to be at a 150 or something like that. Like, that would have helped. Just the simple accessibility. And of course, we can't go back in time, and it's fine. The TOA is fine. If I'm actually genuinely okay with its accessibility, but I feel like the community as a whole has a huge problem with really powerful weapons coming out that are dirt cheap. And that is because the raid is extremely accessible. So you gotta basically, you can't have your cake and eat it too, basically. So I wish this weapon had been charged. And originally I was saying death runes. I wish, if you wanted to use the Fang uncharged, you could, but it would only get 1 accuracy roll. So, if you're just, you're a broke boy, but you got a Fang, you could still use it. It would just get 1 accuracy roll. But if you wanted to charge it, maybe it costs 2 death runes to charge, and you could hold it up. You just charge it up with 100,000 or with 100,000 charges, so it'd be 200,000 death runes. And I'm not saying it needs to be that. It could be coins. It could be anything. I was even suggesting wrath runes until low level irons start freaking the fuck out because they have a Fang and they realize they couldn't use it anymore. That would have been a great option in my opinion. And this also starts including the rest of the economy. The skilling, the skillers now have, oh, hey, if this thing is charged with 2 wrath runes per hit, first of all, nobody can really complain that much that it's outclassing Scythe in certain situations because this thing also has a cost to use. And you can also use a Blade of Saildor and feel good about it, knowing that this is a free weapon. So you're not having to use any charges there. You're profiting more off of it. So there would now be options. You can weigh your options of what you would like to use. And if you don't have Wrath Runes, then, for Iron Man out there, I think it would have been good for Wrath Runes because you're now involving skillers into this economy where, okay, now Wrath Rune crafting is sought after because now you have an extremely powerful weapon that can only be charged with these runes. So now you're introducing this little circle of life, which is pretty cool. So that would have been cool if they did that. And I think that would have been the way to go. Also, if you're like a 70 combat Iron Man and you pull a Fang and realize, oh, I don't need to go for any of these 3 weapons because this weapon's going to fucking just be the best thing forever. If it was charged, if you're a level 70 combat Iron Man, you probably don't have the funds to necessarily just use the Fang whenever, wherever. Now, arguably, that isn't really that big of a problem anymore because every fucking boss in this game just shits out gold. But it would still give you options. So that's my biggest argument for introducing charged weapons. You have options. It gives you options. If people are still delusional and want the scythe to be unlimited for some odd reason, that would be the worst thing ever for this game. It would just make it so there is no option anymore. It's you have a scythe and there's no reason to use anything lower than that. It's just like, I feel like that's so bad for the game. Introduce weapons that have a cost to use, extremely high cost to use if they're super powerful. Like, I would love it if Raids 4, for example, came out with very, very powerful weapons, but it's very, very difficult content, not accessible to everyone on release, and they're extremely expensive and they have incredibly high costs. Something around, I don't know, maybe even costs like 3 to 5 mil per hour to use. But you're using these weapons at the end game bosses because these weapons are extremely fun to use. You're just decimating things. And because Jagex is releasing very difficult content like the awakened versions of the Desert Treasure 2 bosses, you would have really... you'd have like a lot of incentive to get these Raids 4 items, even though you wouldn't just use them economically everywhere. You wouldn't just use a super OP weapon everywhere because it's costing a fuck ton to use. But if it's a charged weapon, for example, that's using resources from skilling, then it's involving the economy. It's involving the skillers into this economy where now these certain skilling methods are actually profitable because they're charging these super powerful weapons, and these super powerful weapons can help you in these very difficult situations, such as the Awakened variants, where you want to get these best-in-slot rewards or these new cosmetics for your gear. I think that's the route we should be going down. That's my own opinion, obviously. Now, I have these 2 weapons down here as well, Dragon Hunter Lance and Arclight. Arclight did a pretty good job on its release. The only downside is that it wasn't that is simply that it's just a free item, it's just a quest item, which isn't the worst thing ever, but it would have been cool if it had an initial cost. But I do like that it's a charged weapon, because if they just released it as is, it would have just simply imagine Arclight came out completely free to use. It would have just killed off every alternative weapon for any class of demons, which would have just been stupid. You can agree with that, right? That's exactly what the Dragon Hunter Lance did. It came out completely free to use. So now every dragon, you are now trolling if you're not using the Dragon Hunter Lance. It's just like, obviously Fang came out, and now, of course, Fang can just decimate metal dragons, which, is kind of odd. But initially, when Dragon Hunter Lance came out, it's like, oh, it's a niche weapon for this. Yeah, but now you have no other option because it's free to use. If Dragon Hunter Lance had come out, and in my ideal world, it would have been Hydra's not just shitting out a fuck ton of loot, but instead, Hydra now gives Hydra scales, for example. So now, the way you are profiting from Hydra is getting uniques and these Hydra scales. And there's not a ton of other loot on the table. It's just these Hydra scales that are constantly funding your Dragon Hunter Lance. So that would have been a great little, like it's just economical cycle or whatever, where like people do Hydra to charge other people's lances, and people are using lances against Vorkath and other dragons, and you just got this good little economy going. But no, instead it's just completely free to use, and it just completely decimated the rapier. If this had charges, you would still have good reason to use the rapier at dragons because it's free to use, even though it's less less what am I trying to say? Less DPS. So anyway, yeah, I just think charged weapons are the way to go. You just got to streamline them so they're not inconvenient, so nobody has a problem with that. Now, the last thing I kind of want to say in regards to weapons is, and this is just food for thought. This isn't like me trying to advocate for anything. It's just trying to give, I don't know, just like it's just me trying to illustrate something. So we live in Defenderscape. Defenderscape is basically shields are completely useless in this game. If you're ever meleeing and you have a one-handed weapon, you just use a defender in every single situation, unless the monster has some arbitrary random attack that can't be defended against, like, you know, ancient wyverns or something, where you'd be better off using the ancient wyvern shield. So in most cases, though, you're going to be using the defender. I think that's really sad, honestly. So even though I know most people are like, no, my DPS, don't you know, take that away from me. Would it be like the worst? Again, this is food for thought. I'm not saying we need to go down this road. This is just me trying to paint this different world of, imagine if shields actually had use, and imagine there was no such offhand that gives strength bonus. And now every time you're using a single-handed weapon, you actually have a choice in shield selection, and shields actually had a use. And then I was thinking, how cool would it be if the combat tab, for example, had like 2 divided sections where it's got like your weapon style, so accurate, aggressive, and defensive, and then you got your shield style, which would be melee, range, and mage. So what you would do is you would select your shield style over here, and for example, if a monster attacked with all 3 styles, you could just choose which style you'd want to have extra defense on. So on top of just the defense that your shield already gives, choosing a style, you know, depending on how powerful the shield is, would give some sort of percentage of complete damage reduction here and there. So I'm just thinking of like some, you know, mediocre shield that has a 20% chance of completely negating an attack. You know, a 1 in 5 chance of it. But you would select the style of what that would be. So let's just say you're attacking something that's only attacking with melee. You would just pray melee. So incoming melee attacks now have a 20% chance of completely deflecting that attack. Not deflecting it, so it's giving damage back. Who knows? Maybe there could be other shields as well that have niches like that. I just think it's really sad that we live in a world where it's just Defenderscape. So anyway, I just wanted to kind of point that out. Like, does anyone else agree with me that Defenderscape is just boring and lazy, and it just sucks that we can't actually just ever use shields and feel good about it? Yeah, so that's all I'll say on that. Now, I want to move on to Forestry real quick, because the last Ramble I talked about Forestry, I wasn't fully honest in my assessment of it. Mainly because I just realized, like, you know what, not everyone's me. Some people I just have to understand that some people just enjoy different things in the game, and that's fine. So I didn't really have any hot takes on it, because I was trying to be like just aware that that piece of content is not for me. But this is what scares me about Forestry. First of all, I'm against part 2 coming out completely. I think it's way too convoluted, and it's just intruding on other skills. And on top of that, I'm hearing more and more like posts on Reddit of saying we should revolutionize other skills. We should forestryize other skills like mining and fishing. So you're mining, and randomly you have some fucking rocks that shoot up off the ground, and you as a community like go mine them together. And then fishing is like you're all fishing together, and you have these random like, ooh, a little pond appeared behind you, and they're all on this. Like, that scares me. That shit scares me. It makes me feel like this game's turning into Toontown, where everything is just a mini game. Like, literally, they've completely turned woodcutting into mini game. It's just everything's a mini game, and there's no like. They did some good things with Forestry, and I want to say what those are. Those are adjusting tree mechanics and allowing it so you can chop with your friends and not feel like you're being punished for chopping with your friends. That was the best thing about Forestry. And just adjusting tree respawn cycles and all that. They did a great job with that. the events are completely unnecessary, and like everything else is just this convoluted mess. It feels like, yes, you can give rewards out, that's fine, but the events are a problem in my eyes, like a complete problem. And I feel like the only reason people actually like Forestry is not because of the events, it's because they now get a chop together and the XP rates are just through the fucking roof. And that seems to be a fundamental problem with skilling in general, which I kind of want to talk about, is this idea that the way to make a better skilling method is to make it just go faster, because there's no actual fun in skilling. Like, we as a community and as the team at Jagex, we don't understand how to make an actual fun skilling method. There's been a few over the years, Hallowed Sepulchre being like the absolute like golden child of perfected skilling methods. Now, it's not absolutely perfect. There's still things that could be better about it, but that is the gold standard. And it's like, for some reason, most skilling updates that come out are made for toddlers. And I say that all the time, and people are getting annoyed by it. But it's seriously, it's like they're just the most piss easy, brain dead, boring pieces of content that ever come out, and people are okay with it because they don't understand how much better it could be. Like, truly how much better skilling content could be. Like, I've literally heard arguments of people saying Tithe Farm is a good piece of content. Like, it's a fun piece of content. Like, by you simply saying Tithe Farm is a piece of content, you are just completely unaware of how much better it could be. Like, truly how much better it could be. It's the same thing with Giants Foundry. People are like, Giants Foundry is a great piece of content. Is it a great piece? So what if Giants Foundry was 25% of the actual XP it gave? So it's literally like just way worse XP wise, 25% of what it is right now. Would you still think it's fun? No, there's no way anybody would think that's fun. Sepulchre, on the other hand, I do Sepulchre. I don't even fucking give a shit about the XP. I'm just having a good time learning the piece of content, and it's fun. XP is like the last thing on my mind, and I hear that a lot from a lot of people. Like, the XP just flies by because it's genuinely an interactive and fun, challenging mini game that you get better at over time. It's so cool. And I wish they would introduce more things like that. And it's not like every single skilling method needs to be challenging, but introducing flow and, you know, this kind of rhythm in skilling and introducing interesting mechanics that are just inherently fun. Like, that is the way to go. And I know, like, I feel like a lot of people are like, well, how do you even do that? Like, there are ways to do it. In fact, I would really love it if Jagex came out with some sort of player design contest or player design content contest again, where, like, you know, people can show their ideas and we could have some player design stuff come into the game again. Because I mean, personally, I have some really fantastic ideas that I think would be just amazing skilling methods. And one of the saddest things, I'm apprehensive of even bringing this up because it's just completely been memeified, but the Gnome Cube, which originally it's not even my idea. It's literally the people from the people that came out with the skill idea mastery came up with it. I just thought it was a brilliant idea that I've just, you know, want to give them credit for it, so I keep calling it a Gnome Cube. But basically an item that starts a 3-tick cycle that can't be broken, and it's one clickable. So instead of knife logging everything, which, you know, we've just all, for some reason, everyone's just become so dogmatic to it that no, efficient skilling needs to be knife log move, knife log move. It's like, why can't we just see the broader picture and realize that the fun and the flow of these methods doesn't come from clicking more. It comes from the rhythm and the predictable resource extraction, basically. Like, just you getting to basically have full control over, you know, your rates and your just character movement and when you're getting things. Like, there's something really addicting about that. For those that have ever done any sort of tick manipulation, you know what I mean. If you've done 2-tick teaks, for example, if you've ever done like some sort of tick manipulation fishing or you know, 3-tick chins or anything like that, you understand that addiction that comes with you being on a certain cycle and getting the resource when you're anticipating it. There's something really special about that. And the idea behind Gnome Cube is to make these really just methods that have come about organically, which, you know, are just, it's just odd that the tick manipulation and the skilling, you know, cycle work this way, the skilling timer and everything work this way. There's been some really interesting methods that have come out, but the problem is that doing them long term is genuinely just not good for your wrist at all. It's just not. That is not where the fun is coming from. I know people are gonna like have a super efficient skillers that have done these skills at 200 mil all are gonna have this biased take where it's like, no, I had to do it this way. Don't ever touch this. Don't ever do this. This is literally a message to high level skillers that think introducing a Gnome Cube is a problem. The problem is if you could just understand that by introducing something that's getting rid of a completely unnecessary click and making these methods more accessible to the average player and just making the methods more fun in general by just not having it so click intensive, but still keeping everything that's good about the method, it's going to in turn almost show people the real fun of these traditional skilling methods. And so we don't have to go down this road of mini gaming every single skill. Like we've seen it time and time again, because there's always only been two options. It's either do the most brain dead AFK skill or sweat your fucking balls off doing 3-tick 4G or something. It's like there's only ever been two options. So they're trying to paint this like middle ground where it's just everything's becoming a mini game. And so this is basically a warning or like sort of a message to those like higher level players that want to see the game kind of remain in this pure state. By introducing Gnome Cube, it's literally going to keep the game more pure in the long term, I think, because you could still have these classic methods. And I feel like a lot of normies and, you know, whatever, like just the average player can actually start getting into them and start realizing just the addictive nature behind them in general. So anyway, just my thoughts on skilling. I really hope that they start realizing that skilling content doesn't need to be just completely brain dead and boring and just focus on getting it done as fast as possible. I really wish they could, I don't know, just get some people that know what they're talking about and get them involved in new skilling activities in the future, like new skilling content that comes out. I wish, I don't know, I hate to say this, but like I almost wish they could listen to people like me, and there's a few others in the community that really are seeing where skilling could go in the future, where skilling is actually as fun as PVM. And we could have a really good balance of people that want to skill for resources, make a bunch of money, people that want to PVM, make a bunch of money that way. It's like, I don't know, it just sucks that skilling is just seen as just boring and useless, and it's just a waste of time. And Adicon and the Sebe cast is just saying, like, no, just skilling sucks. Everyone just wants to get to the high level PVM as fast as possible. Is just skip all the boring shit and get there as quick as possible. So we just need to make Forestry and all these mini games just to, you know, just get past all this garbage. People literally think skilling is useless garbage and just get to the fun stuff, PKing and PVMing and all that shit as quick as possible. So just dilute everything else and just make it fast and faster and faster. I just think it's the worst way to go about it personally. So I've been yelling at this microphone for the past half hour. So anyway, that's all I'm going to talk about today. Obviously, I didn't share my thoughts as clearly as I probably would have wanted, but if you guys have any opinions on this ramble, just leave it down in the comments. I'll probably make a version 2 of this because my thoughts are obviously jumbled as always. So hopefully you guys took something from this, and you guys can let me know what bad takes I have and what better takes you have are down in the comments. I'd love to hear about it. I would love to hear what your guys' takes are, and we can just discuss this as a community. I'm going to be a little bit more active in the comment section on this video. So yeah, just address me down below if you guys have any questions or any sort of other things in regards to what I've talked about today. So anyway, thanks for listening. Drop a like on the video if you enjoyed it, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.